right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Wang, and I work on the ASP.NET team. I'm actually a tester, so usually you see program managers coming to do these talks. I work on the test team that specifically focuses on end-to-end testing. So typically how we ship features is everyone kind of picks a feature and then go deep on testing that. The team that I work on, we go and look at every single feature that we ship as part of the ASP.NET and Visual Studio team, and we try to be the first and best customer. And so we like to think of ourselves as web developers, except the fact that we get to see a much lower quality version of the product first, so you guys don't have to. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the future of ASP.NET. So the way this talk is going to work is I'll start off by reviewing some of the great things that we've shipped in ASP.NET 4.5, just to bring everyone up to date. And then after that, I'm going to go into talking about the release that we just came out with, which is the 2012 February release. You can get that right now through WebPI. I'm going to have a link in the slides, and I understand that these slides are going to be available to the rest of you guys as part of the conference. So you guys can click on the link there. Let me know as I'm going if you guys have any questions. After that, I'll jump into a lot of demos showing you guys what's new in the February release, and mixed in with that, also showing you guys some of the things that we're thinking about. Then we'll go back to slides and we'll kind of talk about the general big picture, what we're thinking of in terms of taking ASP.NET forward and Visual Studio forward. And so hopefully this will be an interesting talk for you guys. If you guys have any questions at any time, feel free to jump in, stop me. We'll go ahead and get started. So we'll start by looking a little bit at ASP.NET 4.5 and the many things that we ship there. So in general, starting from the core pieces, one of the first things that we did was we took our templates and we made all of the assemblies and the script libraries available as NuGet packages. And so now when you go file a new template, all the dependencies are encapsulated inside of NuGet packages, and this makes managing updates and dependencies much easier. We also did some work to the project templates to bring them up to date so they're responsive when you make the screen smaller or less wide. See if people are filing in. And so we've also done additional work just to bring them up to date across the board, and I'll talk in more detail about that when we get to the February release also. We also shipped our popular web optimization framework, and for those of you who haven't seen this, what it is it's a great way for you to bundle and minify CSS and JavaScript files. So it allows you to keep, for example, your CSS files separate at development time, and then bundle them up and minify them when it comes time to actually deploying and running them. So very popular. We also updated ASP.NET for async. We have some file upload, so get buffer list input stream is one of the new APIs that we've shipped that helps take advantage of the new async and await keywords, and also just the async work that's been done under the covers in the core framework. We also shipped improvements to request validation. Before, this used to be enabled basically at a site level. So let's say you had a web form that has name, email, and then a little comment. Well, it turns out that if you want to allow HTML in the comment field, that you have to turn off request validation for your site. So we updated that to basically allow you to do it at either a page level or a control level. So now as you think about it, your web form can have name, email, and those will still have request validation run against them. And then the final comment field, you're able to actually disable request validation and have that work. So really great way. We obviously also recommend that you run your own sanitization on any HTML that you're going to be taking from the customer that's untrusted using a library like anti-XSS or your own custom implementation. So the other thing that we did was we moved some of the data annotations. This is kind of a subtle point. This used to be an MVC, and we moved it into the core assembly so it could be used by other components. And this will become a little more clear as we talk to things like the improvements in web forms where we added model binding. And so that takes advantage of this work here. We also did some updates to enable support of WebSockets inside of the core framework. And so this lights up when you're running IIS 8 on Windows 8. We provide WebSocket support. So additionally, as you can see, we continue to focus on fundamentals, so faster start, smaller memory footprint. And the idea here is that you can continue to build incredibly scalable ASP.NET websites that are performant as we look towards the future. In MVC, we updated the templates for HTML5, and we also shipped a mobile view feature that takes advantage of the ASP.NET browser caps feature. And what that does is, let's say you have a view about.cshtml, you can actually name another view right beside it, about.mobile.cshtml, and that's the view that will be served when a mobile browser comes and hits your site. And so you don't have to write any boilerplate code. We take advantage of the routing underneath the covers. We also introduced Web API in 4.5, and so this is our new framework for REST-based HTTP services. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in terms of the updates that we've made as part of the February release, and also show some demos. Last but not least, web forms, which still accounts for a large majority of our installed base. You can think of these updates in 4.5 as us trying to bring the modern web to web forms. And so we shipped updates to our HTML, to our controls, to allow them to be HTML5 compatible. So you think of, let's say, a text box. Before, there wasn't really a way for you, other than outputting markup directly, to get a datetime element. And so on text mode now, we have a date mode that goes and outputs a compatible HTML5 datetime element. We also implemented model binders and strongly typed data controls. So let's say you have a repeater that's bound to a person object. Before, the only way for you to output was to write a whole bunch of ugly eval statements. You get no tooling for it. But given that we now have model binders and strongly typed data controls, when you type the repeater to that person object, you're now going to get great tooling, which is going to reduce both your pain and the probability of making errors. Finally, we took some of the unobtrusive JavaScript validation work that we did in MVC, and we moved that over into web forms. Another big area of investment for the team overall is open source. And so MVC, ASP.NET Web API, and ASP.NET Web Pages are now all open source projects. And this has been really great for us because it's allowed us to hear from you guys in terms of bugs. You don't have to go through Connect anymore. You can reach the team directly through Codeplex. We're also able to see, and you guys are able to pitch in on our internal design discussions, a lot of which happen as discussion threads. And so it's been really great to see not only just the amount of involvement from the community, so thank you guys, but just the fact that we've been able to ship faster by going to this model because of the pull requests that are coming in. And Entity Framework, which is now also part of our team, is another area where we've really seen a lot of great community involvement. So thank you guys. Also, our latest and greatest product, ASP.NET SignalR, which is our framework for making real-time web communications extremely simple, is also open source, and that is up on GitHub. I'll have a demo of that later on, so we can talk more about it. Great. So let's talk now about what we shipped a couple of weeks ago in February, the ASP.NET and Web Tools 2012 February release. We took the time here, I'll start with web forms since we started with that, we finished with that last time, to make a lot of really good improvements. So starting with web forms, we added scaffolding support to web forms, and so now if you have a model inside of web forms and you want to scaffold out CRUD controllers for that, we use dynamic data under the covers and we provide scaffolding for your model. This point actually goes a little farther because the scaffolding system that we're developing right now in web forms is actually going to be ported over and used eventually to drive our MVC scaffolding. So, and actually also eventually we're going to open that up to the community so you can write your own scaffolding. And so we're really trying to use this as a proving ground, very alpha quality right now, but we're trying to get the feedback, implement it, and basically see where we can go with MVC going forward and your own custom scaffolding. So I'll show a demo of this later. Additionally, a small but really cool thing is that we have friendly URL support, and so this comes down as a NuGet package that is now included in all the default templates. So when you go File, New Web Form Site, we include the friendly URLs package, or you can add it yourself to an existing web form site. And this is really trivial. What it allows you to do is instead of going to site root about.aspx, if you just go to site root about for an extensionless URL, we'll do the routing under the covers to get you to the right page. So simple, but extremely effective, and people really like it. So. In MVC, we did some templating work. One of the most important templates we shipped was the SPA template. So this is, for folks who don't know what SPA is, this is not the place you go and get a massage. This is the single-page application paradigm where you basically have no page refreshes. Your entire app is built inside of a single page. There's client-side, typically JavaScript, that runs, and you have some kind of backend that you talk to. So we shipped a to-do list template that kind of shows some of those patterns, and we'll kind of briefly go over that. We also shipped a Facebook template to enable it to be easier for you to hook up to Facebook, be able to log users in, get a list of their friends, and drive a lot of operations from that perspective. And another interesting things that we shipped is this concept of extensible templates. And extensible templates allow you as a developer to go and author a V6 that will then show up in the new project dialog under the MVC tab. So I'll show an example of that as well. Very, very cool concept that we're playing around with and kind of ties in to some of our future investments that I'll be talking about at the end. In Web API, we also shipped OData support, and OData support is kind of confusing because it's a blanket term. So it provides, there are kind of two different ways to use it. The first way to use it is you can attribute your existing Web API controllers with queryable, and that, like a queryable attribute, and that will enable you to make OData-like queries. So for example, I could do like a top against my existing Web API controller to get the top, I guess the first few entities. Let's say top equals 4, so the first 4 entities. The other thing that we shipped, however, is this model for you being able to actually go and build a real OData service. And so that changes the wire format. We provide some routing. You've got to create an EDM model. And so I'll show some of that. And the advantage of that is that you can actually write a standards-compliant OData service using Web API. So 2 ways. First way is to add existing, give the capability for existing Web APIs to have this OData query support. And the other way is you have a full OData service. So the other thing we did, and based on feedback, was to make it much easier for you to write your own tracing, so you can figure out what's going on under the covers if you run into issues or do logging. So this is just the iTrace writer. We made it much easier to write your own implementation. And we also shipped a feature that documents your Web APIs automatically. And so this is really cool because as you change the signature of your Web API, the help pages that we generate update, and I'll kind of show that in a demo to become more clear. And they provide a really good overview of how to interact with a particular endpoint. In Visual Studio, I'm not going to talk too much about VS because Mads has a talk later on where he's going to talk more about it. But we shipped less support, syntax highlighting support for a lot of languages. We have a mobile emulator story that I'll show a little bit of. We also have selective publishing. So if you think about a web application project where you've gone through the publish wizard, let's say you want to make changes to one file, well, now you can and just right-click publish instead of going through the entire wizard again. We also brought the publish story that we have for web application projects and lit that up for websites. And so really just sharing the technology, finally bringing an updated publishing experience to websites and ensuring that things continue to, you can get your bits hopefully out on Azure. So to pick up this release, just to throw it out there in the slides so you guys have it for later, go to asp.net/vnext. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into some demos. So I'm going to start by creating a new web forms application to demo some of the functionality that I talked about previously. And as you can see, it's going ahead and adding NuGet packages and extracting them from a local cache to integrate into my site. Go ahead and build this and view it in a browser. Looks like I've still got this set up. Different browser. So this is what the default ASP.NET template looks like. Should be very familiar from ASP.NET 4.5. Now with the friendly URLs package, I can go click on the About link, and you'll see that I'm now routed to a clean URL. I don't have to have the about.aspx to be routed to the correct page. And as I mentioned, that's included as a NuGet package inside of your site. So for folks who've never seen NuGet or who've never seen the package management experience that we have, if you right-click your project and you click on Manage NuGet Packages, you will be presented with the following UI, which shows all the installed packages that you have in your site. You can also go online to get new packages and click on the Updates tab to get updates for existing packages that you have installed in your site. So in case that, sorry, I forgot to zoom there. But online, updates, and right now we're in install packages. So you'll see on the next page here that I have this Microsoft.ASP.NET friendly URLs package, which is included now, and provides you with a simple one-line call in your routing, routes.enable friendly URLs, that lights up this functionality. So really easy to go and install the NuGet package, hook up the routes, or just start from the new default template that you get with this release, and you have that enabled. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the scaffolding work that we've done. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and start off with a model. Go with person, add some properties. Let's say name and age. I'm just going to give this a scaffold column false attribute. This is currently required because it's a preview. And then I'm going to go ahead and download the NuGet packages that I need for scaffolding. So I'm going to go to the Online tab, search for scaffold web forms. Important point, you're not going to be able to find the NuGet package yet unless you do include pre-release up here in the top right. And that basically filters it so that you can actually see pre-release packages. And so if we scroll down, you'll see that the ASP.NET Web Form scaffolder here is marked with pre-release. We're going to go ahead and install this. And that is going to go ahead and install the new scaffolding engine and pull it down from the internet. So while that's going, the second component of this is that we're going to need an update to Visual Studio, so a V6 that we're going to go pull down from the gallery. That's going to enable the UI for the scaffolding. And keep in mind, all of this UI is preview UI. It's going to change. Designer's going to go over it, and so I'm just going to say that in advance. But if we go to the extensions gallery and we search for scaffolding, there's a Microsoft ASP.NET scaffolding package, which is currently version 0.1, that you can download, install, and then restart Visual Studio for that to come up. So what that V6 did was add a new option to the Add dialog here. If I zoom in, if you go to your project, right-click, Add, there's now a scaffold option. And so if I click on that, the following UI comes up. And so this asks me to choose a scaffold generator. The reason this is a drop-down now is, as I was mentioning before, we're going to add more scaffolders. You're going to be able to put your custom scaffolders in here. For the time being, there is only the web form scaffolder, which we're going to pick. Actually, I don't remember if I built my site, so I'll just go ahead and build that so the scaffolding can pick up on it. And here I get to choose a model class, in my case, person. A data context class, I'm going to create a new one, and so this is going to wire up Entity Framework so that there's a data context that it can talk through to your underlying database. And I'm also going to generate some mobile views. So I click Add, you'll notice that eventually a views folder will show up as the views get scaffolded out. You'll notice that also my site has a dynamic data folder that was brought down earlier by the scaffolding packages, and that's the mechanism by which we're enabling the scaffolding. And so I'll show you some of the scaffolded pages later. You'll see that they've got dynamic controls and dynamic entities in there. So here are the views. Under person, because we have friendly URLs in here already, we can just go to site root /view/person to see the scaffolding. But first of all, I'm going to show you some of the code. So here's the list view for the default. It goes and scaffolds out a dynamic controls for both the name and the age. And the edit views are going to use dynamic entities. So these are going to be generated on the fly based off of your model. For those of you who haven't seen dynamic data before, all the code for the entity templates that are used are going to be under this dynamic data folder here in the right. And you're going to be able to look at these entity templates and edit them to output whatever markup you choose. And so we provide some defaults. You're able to go in and edit them and tweak them. And you get a lot of the benefits of dynamic data, which is automatic field template selection. And so you'll notice I put in an integer, so that gets automatically scaffolded out as a different type of input. So if I build this site and I do a view, I'm going to go to views, person. And I'm going to get the ability to create new people. So Jim, you'll see that I get an input type that actually has a cursor that I can click on. So it's a number type. Stick this in there. Create some more people. I'm able to edit as well. So this is the scaffolding that we showed earlier. If I try inputting a person with no name, I'm going to apparently not get an error because I did not mark that as required, and so this is going to be a good exercise for us to jump into the models. Where did I put my model? In root. Gotcha. So I'm not going to get any validation on that because my model didn't actually say it was required, but we do light up validators based off of your model. So I'm going to go ahead and add that required attribute right now. And then you're going to go see pretty much a yellow screen of death very shortly. Because what's happened now is Entity Framework is going to complain that my model has changed and I haven't updated my backing database. And so it's going to say, please go consider using code-first migrations, which is a feature that we shipped in Entity Framework 5.0, to update your database and effectively make it so that your database, the context, matches what's actually in there. So we're going to go ahead and start doing that right now. If you go into Tools, Library Package Manager, you'll notice there's an icon here for the Package Manager console, and that's where we're going to enable migrations. So this is actually a lot simpler than going and hand editing your database when things get complex, and migrations also provide you with the ability to go backwards and forwards in time. So to enable migrations for my project, I'm going to type enable migrations. Hopefully everyone can see that. Goes and creates a database context configuration context for me where I can also go in and add seed data later on if I would like. And it also creates a migration called initial create, which is what is in the database right now. And because I've changed that, I need to add a migration called making name required. So I'll just zoom in for folks so that's really visible. And when I do that, Entity Framework is going to go look at my model, look at the database, compare them, and figure out that, oh, what you need to do to move to this migration is to alter the column name in the people table so that it's actually required. Finally, I just want to go ahead and apply this migration, so I just run the update database command, and that goes and applies this migration to the database. And because I already have a null person in the database, as you saw earlier, okay, so I'm not going to be able to delete that because of this yellow screen. So we'll just cheat and go into Server Explorer and delete that person so that we can actually apply this migration. So yeah, that's not going to be valid data. And this is kind of why migration is supposed to help you out. It warns you about this type of thing, because otherwise, what we're going to have to, if we did this automatically under the covers, you could potentially lose that column without you having to provide any sort of manual intervention. So in this case, I go delete it. Error message was very helpful. I update my database. Everything is good. It went ahead and ran the seed method, which didn't have anything in it. And then I can go ahead and refresh my page. And now when I go to views person and try to create a new person who does not have a name, I'm going to get a bunch of error messages as I expect. And so the scaffolding has updated itself for the model. And once again, this is just a starting point, scaffolding, and so you can go in and do much more complex things, but it's a great demonstration of how all the different pieces that we ship tie together, from EF and migrations to adding validators, to providing scaffolding for your model. So one other interesting thing about this particular example is that our views have this default.mobile.aspx convention. And so I'm actually able to serve mobile views out of this particular site. And this is also a feature that we've brought in from MVC. It's part of the friendly URLs package. And at this point, usually what I would do is I would go and try to mess with my user agent headers to see if I could go and serve up the mobile pages. But one of the great things that we shipped in Visual Studio for this release is this More Emulators link under the Browser Selection tab. So if I click on More Emulators, I'll be linked to a site that shows me everything that I can install that is going to integrate with Visual Studio. So I'm going to show two of these today, Browser Stack and Electric Plum, who builds iPhone and iPad emulators. So if you click on this link, they'll send you instructions. They have a free 7-day trial, and then you have to pay them. I happen to have a licensed copy, and I've installed it. And so if I just select iPhone Simulator from this dropdown, and I click View in Browser, not sure why there are two. Gotcha. There's a backing context. And then I go to views/person. Click Edit. I'm now going to be shown the jQuery mobile views that were scaffolded out. And so obviously beta quality, but gives you a very quick idea of the fact that we do provide you with mobile scaffolding that works in the friendly URL packages. And additionally, just the end-to-end experience of you not having to mess with your user agent string and being able to browse with a custom browser that you've gone ahead and installed. Additionally, another pain point that people commonly experience is testing cross-browser or operating system. So another feature that we shipped is we integrate with Browser Stack now. I don't know if you guys can all see this window, but it provides a drop-down for operating system and browser. And what they do is they use tunneling to get to your local site. And so now using their service, I can actually go and test on legacy operating systems and browsers through VMs that I don't actually go out and have to provision. So let's say I want to test on Windows XP, and I'm interested in what my site looks like in IE7. When I click Go, Browser Stack is going to launch. You're going to need to sign up for an account, but they go and provision a VM for me, and then they provide an IP tunnel to my local site so I can actually browse effectively localhost through IS Express in their custom VM. So this is going to connect me up to the server, and if all goes well, this is my site. So a lot of cool things that you can do here, and as this list continues to expand out and provide additional browser targets for you, you can see right now we've got Windows Phone. You can try to test Windows Mobile 653 if that is a target browser for you, or operating system. And we've also got Android support as well. And so the link to this page is inside of Visual Studio, as I mentioned. And so really great feature for you guys to go and check out, find something that fits your needs if you find yourself doing a lot of this type of testing. Great. Are there any questions so far? Yes, in the front. Yes, for the, sorry, the question, so yeah, the question was for the Android browsers, all the versions. You can go to the SDK and you can install whatever versions they have available, but I'm not, yeah, we can go look. Yeah, I don't, so it looks like they're mainly going off of latest, yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Great. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to MVC and Web API specifically. So I'm going to go and create a new Web API site. And the purpose of this demo is going to be to show some of the help pages functionality and also show how it updates as we provide changes to it. And additionally, to show some of the beta features that we're working on and thinking of as we continue to move forward with Web API. So if I build, you notice that these defaults are sticky, so I'm going to go switch back to Chrome. View in browser. And this is the default ASP.NET Web API site. You'll notice we have a new section now called API. If you click on that, it shows you documentation for the API controllers that are currently in the site. And so since it's the default scaffolding, we provide some documentation for what's in there already. This isn't very useful to me at the moment, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that controller and start from my own model. So I'm just going to pick a to-do list, since that ties in with our later demos. Search for class. And I'll go ahead and create this. I'm going to make name required so that we don't have to go through scaffolding again, or migrations rather. And I guess a Boolean of whether or not it's actually done. Great. So now I'm going to build my site, and I am going to use the scaffolding that looks familiar to go ahead and scaffold out my web API backed by Entity Framework. So I'm going to call this a to-do controller, pick a model class, and a data context class. I'm going to create a new one, Web API data context. So this wires up EF. I click add. This goes out and scaffolds the controller, creates the data context. I build my site, and I view it. And now when I go to the help pages page, all my API documentation is going to be updated for how you're actually going to go and call this entity. So if I click into this, you'll see that it shows you what to expect when you call the GET request for all the to-do items that are in the page. Gives you the JSON format that's going to come over the wire. This highlights a lot of the benefits that you're going to get with Web API, specifically content negotiation. So if you make a request for JSON, it's going to come back as JSON. If you want XML, it'll come back as XML. The post controller is also here. Tells you where you need to define the parameter in the request body. Also shows you the request body formats that are acceptable. Form URL encoded is not one of them. But the next question is, okay, well, how do we take this further? How do we, let's say, insert or like look at, let's say, at the next step here, you could go to Fiddler, you could try to insert, you could seed your database by using migrations like we saw before in the previous demo. But we've been working on a Web API test client that I'm going to show to you guys now. And this is actually public, it's in preview. One of the developers on our team wrote this. So if you search for simple test inside of NuGet, you'll see that, once again, remembering to highlight pre-release, you'll see that we have a simple test client for ASP.NET Web API. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this down. That is going to install. And then I'm going to go and update the actual help pages to render out the test client. So if I jump into Areas, Help Pages, Views, Help, API. Did I type this one? Display for model. All right. Okay. So this goes and renders out the markup and the associated script references that are going to be required. Build my site, view it. And now when I go to the post controller, in the help pages, you're going to see this test API button light up. If I click on this, you'll see that I've got kind of a Fiddler-like interface. I can choose which HTTP verb I want to use against my endpoint. I can add headers if I desire, play with the body. So I'm going to go ahead and say, finish talk, not done. Send this up. This goes and pushes this content up to Web API. Gives me a status code, headers, the body that came back. And it also provides me with an ability to see what happens if I screw up my request. So let's say I don't provide a title. You'll see that we actually provide model state on the wire that says, hey, you need to actually provide a name for your to-do item, or this isn't a valid request. So also the HTTP status code is provided here. And to prove that that actually worked, we can go back and we can test the to-do controller. And if we click on Test API here, we can do a get, and you'll see that the entity that I inserted comes back as a 200 OK. And so this is just a way for you to kind of test inside the browser if you're doing development. And we'd really like feedback on this, actually, if this is something that you want to see us continue investing in, or if you're just going to use Fiddler. And so, that if you either ask a question at the end, provide feedback directly, or you can come talk to me afterwards. We'd really love to hear it because, like I said, this is a prototype that a developer built, but it's just something that we're showing to see if we get a positive response from the community. Cool. Last thing I'll show that's kind of more of a tooling thing, but is also really cool, is the fact that we now provide the ability for you to hydrate a C# object from JSON. And so whether you're going against your own endpoint or someone else's JSON that you've received, let's say from a public API, you can go into a CS file, edit, paste special, paste JSON as classes. We also support XML, but I'm going to be showing JSON. And you'll see that this actually goes and hydrates a proper class along with a wrapper class. And so making it a little easier for you to work with JSON objects in a managed language. Great. So next we're going to move on and show the single page application templates or the template that we shipped as part of this release. So I'm going to call this SPA template. And this is the to-do application that I was talking about earlier. And so this is going to use Knockout.js, which is a client-side MVVM framework on the front end, and it's going to talk to MVC on the back end to produce a to-do list. All right, so I'm going to run the site, and I'll kind of quickly just walk through some of the functionality that's in here. You're going to get the ability to register. You'll notice that there's no page postbacks here, that this is just seamless. There's an animation on the front end. I get to sign up, edit a to-do list. See, I'm getting live validation, and all this is happening with JavaScript, getting persisted back also to the server if I do a full page refresh. And also there's API documentation, which is a little more meaningful here since there are actually two endpoints you can go against, one for the actual lists and one for the actual items. So from an implementation perspective, this is more of a patterns type of template, and it shows you a sample of how you might do stuff like this. And so there's Knockout on the client side, and it goes ahead and talks to a backend that we've implemented as well. And so this is a great point actually to jump into some other ways of doing SPA templates, and so of doing single page applications. And so we realized that, hey, Knockout's not the only way to build a SPA, and so yeah, we've got a template, but what else is out there? And so one of the things that we did was, as I mentioned, we provide a way now for you to create a V6 that is also a template. And so let's say we want to do hot towel, Ember, like folks have gone out and created templates. We've got 4 here right now, but you can create more and we'll add to this list. We can go look at Breeze. Breeze is a good one to look at because they basically went and implemented the exact same thing that we had, except for using their paradigms. And what they do is they provide a data context layer on the client side and on the server side that makes it easier to do a lot of entity operations. So now you'll notice I installed the V6, I restarted Visual Studio, create new project, call it Breeze. And now I've got that template inside of my new project dialog. And so you could imagine this for anything else that you create. Maybe there's something that you do a lot that you would like a specific template for. That's something that we are now enabling just by authoring a V6. So it goes ahead and creates the project. From a functional perspective, this is exactly the same as the to-do list, so I'm not going to bother with building and actually running it, but I will show you some of the code and some of the differences just to prove to you that this actually is a unique template and not something that we've come up with as smoke and mirrors. So under the app directory, you'll see that we're actually using Breeze now. They've got an entity manager object that you can use to work with the to-do list. And they've also got a different paradigm for where they like to store their script files. You'll notice that in our template, we had them under scripts app. Ward actually prefers to have it at the top level. And so that's just a really good, the high level concept, obviously, independent of what you're doing here is, yes, we provide a SPA template. Yes, we know there are other ways to build single page applications, and we're enabling you to really run wild with your imagination. So, great. So next I'm going to open up an OData site that I built previously and show how you would actually set up an OData service. And so this is what I was talking to before, where there are 2 ways to use the new OData support that we've shipped in this release. This is the first way, which is you actually go and, the second way, where you actually go and create a full-fledged OData service. And so you'll see it's 4 lines of code in your application start. What you want to do is go and create a model. In this case, this is a list of movies, so I'm going to go create the entity set for my movie class, which has a bunch of properties. And then I build an EDM model. And then I pass that EDM model into this new map OData route API, and that routes the API appropriately. Then in my controller, I just need to go and implement entity set controller, which provides a lot of nice overridable methods for dealing with entities, specifically, actually, patch requests, which is something that's worth calling out explicitly, since it's an operation that we currently support only with an OData controller. And so this is something that's on the backlog for a vanilla web API service that we want to support patch requests. And it's something that if you really need right now today, you can go and implement an OData service and get that functionality. And it provides a really nice way of working with that patch data because it's the delta, right? And so all you have to do is just do patch.patch right here. And that goes and applies the delta of the properties. Let's say I have the movie object, and I just want to change the title. I provide title on the wire, call patch, and everything is done after I've saved it to my database. So really powerful tools that we provide there. So if I go ahead and run this site, run the query, a bunch of movies come back. I'm able to do typical OData operations like get the first 4 movies. I can do filtering. Let's say I want to do genre. Provides all the dramas. I've also got paging support lit up. One thing worth calling out here also is that because I implemented an OData service, we went and actually changed what comes out on the wire. And so I'm hitting the service directly here. And you'll see that we've got this OData metadata property. All the values that actually come down are wrapped up in this value property. And paging is implemented using this OData.next link paradigm. And if I'd requested a different page, actually I can just follow this OData link to get to the next page. You'll see that there's, if I zoom in, if I zoom in, you'll see that actually goes and updates to get me the next page. And so we provide a lot of this functionality once we have the EDM model that you've created. So it's a little bit of work up front as opposed to just going directly against EF or a vanilla API controller, but you do get these additional constructs that are really helpful when you're building the site. And the way you do paging is if you go into the movie controller, you'll see that on the queryable attribute, I just specified a page size. And so that's how that gets lit up on the server side, and then I go and write the SPA application that interacts with it on the client side. So one other thing that you'll see here is I've got this other attribute kind of commented out that shows allowed order by properties, rating, and popularity. And so we actually have a blog post on OData security, and so once you've opened up your endpoint to these queries, you can imagine that people could start to do interesting things in terms of querying your data set. And this is probably something that you would want to restrict. And so this link is also in the slides, but we have security guidance. Basically, there are 2 scenarios, right? There's a scenario where you control the back end and you control the front end, so you're building you're building the client and the server piece. And so you know which operations should be exposed, and you can be much more aggressive. And there's a scenario where you're providing an endpoint that's a little more open. And in that case, maybe there's not a lot of things you can lock down, except for things that you know are definitely not supposed to be done. So there's paging. You can whitelist specific query operations. You can also select a maximum node count. Yeah, this is big enough. You can disable any and all functions because those can be slow. And so this is a really great blog post for anyone who's building a public-facing OData web service to go through. And even if you're just attributing queryable on Web API, it's the same thing. You want to make sure that you're restricting and locking down appropriately. You can also write your own custom filter query validator. And so depending on your specific needs, you're able to lock down through that mechanism as well. So great post. I've got a link to it inside of the presentation. Encourage that you guys go check it out. Cool. So we are going to end the demos with SignalR. And this is really my favorite demo. So SignalR is, if I can spell it, SignalR is our framework for building real-time web applications. And it makes it really easy because it gets you out of the business of doing protocol negotiation. And so what that means is, let's say I have a WebSockets-enabled server, but I've got clients coming in that only support long polling. Well, now I've got to go and handle all that, think about, okay, well, how do I do down-level support? SignalR takes all that away. It basically says, why don't you work at a high level where you have a hub, people connect to that hub, it doesn't matter how, we're going to handle how that happens. So we'll start with WebSockets if it's supported. If it's not supported, we'll go to HTTP streaming. And if that's even that's not supported, we'll fall back to long polling, which is going to be supported everywhere. And so it gets you out of the business of doing that and makes it extremely easy for you to go and build an application very quickly. And so for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to quickly build out a chat sample. I'm going to start by adding a SignalR hub. And so this is the item templates that we've shipped as part of this release. You'll notice that there's also this other class called a persistent connection. So you can think of this as just a lower level of abstraction. Hubs provide things like groups, which you can use to group users together, and is probably the place that 90 to 95% of developers are going to start. If you need more control, like over the actual connection, then we recommend you go to the persistent connection class. So I'm going to start with a hub. I'm going to call this chat. So reason it takes so long to create a CS file is because creating that SignalR hub actually goes out to NuGet, downloads all the dependencies you need, and so it's a great way in one click to get started with a hub, and goes and gets, so you can see it goes and gets jQuery, it goes and gets SignalR. In order to light up the proxy class generation for the hub, I'm also going to have to add a global ASAX file and set up routing, which is a single line call to map hubs. And then I can go ahead and start implementing the actual page. Great. So what do I actually need for my SignalR application? Well, right now, the client that we're going to use is going to be a jQuery-based client. So we're going to include jQuery, we're going to include SignalR, and we're also going to include a reference to the proxies for the hub so that we have a way to connect up to the hub from the client side. And that is going to be SignalR/hubs. Then I'm going to go ahead and build out some very rudimentary UI for my chat application. So I'll start with the input type text. ID equals message. Add a button. Equals send. And then I'm going to add a UL where all the messages can actually live. Then I'm going to go ahead and start writing script. So for those who aren't familiar with jQuery, this block of code here is a shortcut for waiting until the DOM ready event. So that's going to wait until all these elements have actually loaded, and then I'm going to be able to do selection queries against them. And so I'm going to be able to go and grab let's say the message that you've actually typed into the text box, and then go and also grab the unordered list that has the messages and append to that. So I'm going to start off by creating a reference to my proxy class. So this is a SignalR concept, $.connection. And then on that, I'm going to create a client API called addMessage. And this is actually what the server is going to call when a message comes down. And so I receive a message from the server that says a message has come down. What do I want to do? Well, I've got the message inside the payload, and so what I want to do is go and append that message to the messages UL. In an actual production scenario, you probably don't want to be writing markup like this. You would probably want to use some kind of template, but for the purposes of this demo, we're just going to quickly show that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do connection.hub.start. And because this is jQuery, connection.hub.start actually returns a jQuery promise, which is a fancy way of saying that I can attach a done or error handler to it. And so once you've actually made a connection up to the server, I should go and wire up a click handler for send so that you can actually send information to the server. So I'm going to go ahead and write the code for that. I'm going to use the same chat object for SignalR. I'm going to call server, and I'll call this send. And I'm going to send up a payload, which is going to be the value of message. Great. Now I just need to go and write the server code that handles that. So instead of hello, this is going to be called send. It's going to have a string of message on the wire. And I just call clients.all.addMessage. So from a flow perspective, what is going to happen is client 1, once they're connected up, is going to click on send. Their message is going to go up over the wire. The server is going to receive the message, and then it's going to perform a broadcast of the message that it received to all the other connected clients. And once all the other connected clients receive that, they are going to call into this function, which then goes and appends the message into the DOM. So extremely easy, not a lot of lines of code. Wait, do I have a typo? Where? Ah, perfect. Thank you for the catch.
There's another typo.
Is there?
The first hash message.
The first hash message. Ah, thank you. Thank you. Great. So I go ahead and run that. I'll open that on another browser, and you'll see that what happens is, as I type in one window, message goes up to the server, it's authoritative, and it gets sent over the wire. So extremely easy way for you to get up and running with chat. There's obviously many other powerful applications of SignalR. I've actually got a talk tomorrow where I go and build a SignalR grid that live updates based off of multiple users, so you can come and update the grid, and that change gets pushed up to over the wire, and everyone else gets to see the update. So a lot of different applications, very cool space. Once again, I didn't have to worry about any of the connection mechanics or anything else that was going on. Just thinking at a very high level, I was able to build this application. So cool. We will go back to slides. Whoa. Before we resume, are there any questions about any of those demos, any of the features? Do people find the Web API test client useful? Yeah, question over here.
Question on the single page applications. There used to be a template for options. What happened to that?
So the question is, they're on the SignalR help page?
No, before. Single page applications.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be options.
Ah. Gotcha. Okay, so the question is, in the single-page applications help page, there used to be a reference to this thing called upshot.js, which was a client-side proxy for WCF data services. Excuse me. What happened with Upshot is that we actually de-invested in it, and so the folks who were working on it went to actually work on the Azure portal, and we found that the community had also kind of filled in that gap. And Breeze.js is actually very similar to Upshot. So if you're interested in Upshot, I encourage you to go check that out. But unfortunately, we're a small team. Many people think we're a big team. We have limited resources, and so we try to, and that's why we like to have these talks too. It's like we try to gauge interest from the community, prioritize appropriately, and apply our resources. So, great. No other questions? Okay, cool. Wait for this to come back. All right, let's talk about the future. So from a release perspective, we like to release around every 6 months. And so, as you can see, in September 2012, we shipped ASP.NET 4.5. We then shipped ASP.NET and Web Tools 2012 February release in February, a couple weeks ago. And generally speaking, sometime around September, we're not going to promise anything, but you'll probably see another drop from us. And so that's just kind of a general FYI for when we roll up our releases. And so the reason for this is actually because now that we have so much open source stuff, it's kind of harder to keep track of what you're supposed to be using. And so we try to roll up everything into these bundled releases for folks who want to have a pseudo-official release that they're kind of going off of. And so that's the reason for the interval. Any feedback on that is also welcome. If you'd like to see fewer releases, more guidance on what you should be using in terms of, we've got the pre-release packages out now and everything else. So definitely either come up or ask questions. Here's the exciting stuff. So here are the things that we're thinking about broken down by feature. And so this is the stuff that we're looking for both feedback on, and this is also more of a general FYI. In terms of NuGet, we're going to add support for C++ projects. That's going to come in the next version. It's something that folks have asked for a lot. The other thing is selective overwrite. And so currently, if you have a project that has files inside of that are NuGet managed, let's say I have jQuery installed in my project, And for some reason, I've gone ahead and modified the jQuery source for whatever reason. Right now at NuGet, we'll just gloss over and say, oh, wow, it looks like you modified this file. I have no idea what to do with it, so I'm skipping it. This feature is to add the support to allow you to choose what you want to do. So you can either ignore, say, yeah, go ahead and skip it, or you can say, overwrite the file. Just, I know what changes I made. I don't want those anymore. Just overwrite it and get my project back to a state that makes sense. Or you can also select overwrite all. And so if you know what you're doing, you can go ahead and overwrite everything in the page. And so this is something that folks have, was really annoying. Folks have asked for it. We're going to address it in the next version. On the Visual, well, someone likes it. Awesome. On the Visual Studio side, we're going to continue innovating in Web Essentials. So for folks who haven't installed Web Essentials, do it now, because it's extremely helpful in terms of your day-to-day web development. If you're doing any type of CSS or HTML markup, even we've got the color picker. Less support actually first shipped in Web Essentials. It's kind of the bleeding edge of, it's actually number 2 in the Visual Studio Extension Gallery, I believe. And it's the bleeding edge of what we're thinking about for the editor. And Mads does a great job, a PM on our team, he does a great job of keeping that up to date. We're obviously thinking about fundamentals. So that's better IntelliSense for HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We're noticing that as folks write more single-page applications, there isn't as much rich support for that as your client-side code gets extremely complex for jumping between, let's say, functions inside of a view model or properties. And so we're looking at ways that we can make that experience better as people build more and more of these types of applications. We're also going to make project template improvements. And so that's a very vague term. I'm going to be diving a little deeper into that in the next couple of slides, so hold that thought for now. And we're going to continue with publishing enhancements. And one of the things we're working on right now is integrating Azure websites as a first-class citizen into our publish experience. So you're going to be able to provision sites. You're going to be able to manage anything that's out there and provide a much better integrated experience inside of Visual Studio is something that we're prototyping and looking into right now. So on the MVC and Web API side, we're looking at improved scaffolding. We're going to take the web form scaffolder when it's ready and make sure that our scaffolding is pluggable and add Entity Framework 6 support to it. We're also looking to update our membership system so you can use Windows Azure Active Directory, or WAD. And you can provide that, and we can provide that for you as part of either updated templates or the other template improvements that I'll be talking to shortly. In Web API, we're considering looking at OAuth 2 and JWT, which stands for JSON Web Token. And that is going to provide you the ability to either sign your own JWTs or just interpret them on the Web API side. So it's something that we're actively looking into just to make the auth story a little more well-rounded. In terms of the OData support that we shipped, we don't yet have support for the keywords select, expand, and batch. So we're going to be rounding out that support in the next version as well. We're going to continue our focus on core, so performance, async, memory footprint, all those things, especially in MVC and Web API, we're going to receive a renewed focus. And we're also going to make unit testing easier for API controllers. So I don't know if anyone's ever tried to unit test Web API. It is very difficult. So we're going to, one of the ideas there is that we can return an action result or an iAction result, just like MVC. Here's a template thing. No more project GUIDs. So what we're trying to do here is enable a couple of scenarios. First one is that you create an empty ASP.NET application. And right now we ask you a lot of questions, or we don't necessarily ask you a lot of questions, but there's stuff that you don't know about the site you're building at project creation time, right? Let's say you start from a web forms app and web forms app, and a few years later you need to add MVC to it, right? We have support for that right now, but there's certain things that aren't going to work because we're tied to this project type GUID on the tooling side. And so what we're thinking of is trying to make this dialogue more re-entrant. So this is something that you continually revisit as your project progresses. So you can go add MVC, you can connect up to services, Azure services, add Web API, add SignalR, and making it re-entrant. A lot of the scenarios that you might think of as NuGet scenarios, trying to make that as part of the project creation experience. You might have heard of this initiative as OneASP.NET if you've heard of that term before, and so this is kind of all under that particular umbrella. The second scenario is to be able to create a custom template. So that's to say we've got a precursor of this in the scaffolding work where we're saying, hey, you can go and write your own scaffolding. But if we took it one step further and said, you have a template, we're going to give you tooling to go make that template into a V6, snapshot it, and share it out with either your team, the public, and so definitely some things that we're thinking about on that end. Authentication configuration tooling. So this is part of the reentrancy of this dialog that later on, once you're finished building the application, you want to wire up auth, you can come back, add the various different pieces that you want for which authentication story you want to have in your application. And also being able to find appropriate NuGet packages as part of this wizard. So let's say we can either suggest NuGet packages for you, or depending on what's currently in your application, we can do some smarts here. Very early prototype phase for all this stuff, but these are kind of the high-level scenarios that we're thinking of enabling in the next version. Themes. So we've got 3 themes for the next release, and kind of also as we're looking out towards the long-term future. The first theme, where all of our innovations are going to pivot around, is connected devices. So we want to be the best platform for servicing connected devices. So you can think, iPhone, you can think Windows Phone, your iPad, your Surface. We want to make sure that you can write web APIs that can target all of these different platforms, and that you can build sites that can, or experiences that can do that as well. We want to continue to remain the best platform for building websites. So this is innovations in core, innovations in our existing technologies. We want to maintain that ecosystem. And thirdly, we want to make sure that Azure is the place to host your ASP.NET application. And so this is things as simple as integrating with the service inside of Visual Studio, or more involved things that we're still working on right now. And the idea is that Azure is a first-class citizen when it comes to your ASP.NET application. Next up are some fun slides that I stole from Scott Hanselman in terms of facts. So there are 1 billion PCs right now running Windows. There are also 1 billion mobile subscriptions. So as you think about this, that's actually 1 mobile subscription for every 7 people on Earth. And if you look at even further at that, and look at a breakdown by countries, you'll see that there are many countries that have a high percentage of mobile-only web users. So these are folks who only have a phone, or they only have an iPad. They don't have a PC at all. And so for them, the web experience is that experience on the device, and they don't have anything else. And so if you think about targeting these users as the trend goes up, the market for smartphones and tablets is going to be bigger than PCs. And so as we think about building websites, as we think about our platform, that's kind of where we got our themes from, is that, looking at the trend of where the users are going and where we're going to have to target our platform and our sites in the future. We're thinking about, connected devices, obviously, given the growing market there. Web, we're continuing to maintain our position there for all the investments that we have. And obviously Azure, so that when you do build that site, that you're able to scale it out, and Azure is the best platform for doing that. So here are some of the links that we talked about. Obviously, they're going to be in the slide deck. And that's it. We left a lot of time for questions, for feedback. So go ahead and get the ball rolling. Yes?
We had a session this morning about TypeScript.
Uh-huh.
And you didn't mention it at all. Does this mean that they're only at an early stage?
Yeah, okay, so the question is, that's a good question. So the question is, there was a session this morning on TypeScript, and there was no mention of it at all. And so is this something that is in the early stages? Like, what's the state? Yeah, TypeScript is definitely in the very early stages. And we actually have projects internally that are using TypeScript. And so as we investigate and we kind of keep an eye on that particular developer audience, it's definitely something that we're looking to cater to in the future. If I remember correctly, Mads, you did some playing around with TypeScript as well in Web Essentials. And so he can talk probably more to that. I believe we have some support, right? I think if you download the latest Web Essentials, there is some support, but it's nothing that's obviously in the core framework or on the necessarily a formal roadmap right now. But we're definitely keeping an eye on it as things develop in TypeScript. There are a lot of benefits that TypeScript provides in terms of type checking. Now, whether or not that ends up picking up, I think, is something that we're going to have to keep a close eye on. As I mentioned, the team has limited resources, and folks have tried to change JavaScript before with varying levels of success. So yeah, it's something that we're keeping an eye on. So great question. Yes, question in front.
All those SPA templates, are they really production-ready code?
Okay, so the question is, all the SPA templates that are available, are they really production-ready code? It depends. Do you want to build a production to-do list? Or like, I guess maybe I have a second question. Yes, the code in there does provide best practices, but there is some work that you're going to have to do to get it to production. So maybe, like, is there a more specific question that?
Like for example, the connection with Breeze and so on. Is this really a stable JavaScript code? Can it be used in a large-scale application?
Gotcha, the connection with Breeze where it's an additional, so you're talking more about the third-party templates, not the ones that are, gotcha, yeah. I cannot say that we've done any necessary, testing on that. Like, in terms of, if you think about Breeze, right, they've got the server component and they've got the client component as well. The client component, obviously, doesn't have any, scale type of requirements. I'm not sure how much testing they've actually done. That's more of a Breeze question, I guess. And I think you bring up a good point, though, which is that, given the fact that, you're downloading a v6 from someone who's, not necessarily Microsoft, there is some additional, due diligence on your part, right? Like, I could build a template that is horrible and I could put it out as a v6. Now, having said that, the templates, Breeze is a framework that is used by a lot of people. Ward is a great guy, and so I don't foresee it as being, bad. I just would caution and say, no, we haven't actually done that level of validation. But I don't see any reason why it wouldn't scale.
So that brings to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
You have the NuGet packaging system, and
Yep.
I don't feel very comfortable with downloading something from there, except if it's really from Microsoft.
Gotcha.
So how can you ensure me that it's really quality code there?
Gotcha. Yeah, so the question is, you guys have this great NuGet package management system, and I'm afraid of using it because anyone can put anything up there. I'm not sure that, things come from Microsoft, things have been vetted, and I'm afraid of it. That's the core of the question, I believe. So the answer to the question is, yeah, we're looking at, this came up during the MVP Summit as well, and so we're looking at ways that we can provide, at least a Microsoft, somewhat validated feed. Obviously, there's infrastructure that we would need to build if it was to be fully validated. Like, the only way we could do that would be signing the package, right? And so there's a lot of infrastructure. It's definitely something that's come up. It's definitely something we're investigating. It is not a trivial work item. I think the other feedback we've heard is like, hey, just anything is okay. Like, don't sign the packages, but maybe if you could just have a Microsoft, we've looked at it and it's not a virus type of feed. And that's something that's definitely come up and something we're looking into. I think the resistance from it on our team side is that if you think about that, like, what if that feed gets hacked, right? If that feed gets hacked, hopefully people have enough common sense not to go and download it, but then it becomes somewhat of a liability for us. And so it's something that they're discussing. That's kind of why you haven't seen us just come out with the minimum bar would be easy, right? It's just another feed endpoint. That's like, subscribe to this feed if you want, a Microsoft-approved endpoint. But yeah, definitely some feedback that we've heard before and things we're looking to address. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that if you are in an environment where there are only certain packages that you trust, like you can't open up your internal developer environment just to NuGet as a whole, you can also run your own NuGet package server, or you can just turn any file folder into a NuGet package source. And so if you have, let's say, a UNC share inside of your company that you want to say, okay, these are the validated NuGet packages that we know are not viruses, that we know you should be using, you can get your developer set up to point to that specific feed, and then in that way, you maintain complete control, right? As opposed to like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, right? I mean, you saw when I searched for Twitter Bootstrap, when I was doing searches in the demos, like, there's a lot of stuff that comes back. And sometimes it's hard to filter. So that would kind of be the temporary recommendation. Rest assured, it's something that we're definitely looking at. So thanks for the feedback. Cool. Any other questions? Sorry, I can't really see the top, so folks put their hands up. Okay. Well, great. Oh, sorry, one more question. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is the browser stack service that was demoed. I've heard that it's limited to 3 months in terms of a trial. Yeah, when I signed up, they actually give you 30 minutes. So what that means is 30 minutes of, like, not 30 minutes from when you sign up, but 30 minutes of actual VM time. Because that's how they, I guess it's a transparent cost model, right? That's what it costs them, because they have to run the VM and have it up for a certain period of time. So whether it takes you 3 months or 3 years to use that time, or a day, it's 30 minutes right now. So, and that's the other thing that's challenging also with some of these extensions is, we provide the extension there, but the extension author, so whoever the provider is, they own the model for, let's say the trial period. They own the model for licensing, like with Electric Plum. We're currently in discussions with them right now because, when you click on install, you actually have to go through their setup and then launch the app once before the button will show up in Visual Studio. And so there's stuff that we're continually working on as we're being made aware of it to make that experience better. But Browser Stack, yeah, in their particular case, have chosen to change the way they do billing as a business. So, cool. Okay, so if there are any other questions, concerns, feedback, I'll be here for at least the next 30 minutes to an hour. So please do come by. We love your feedback. We're building this product at the end of the day for you guys as the community. So thank you guys so much for coming to the talk, and I hope you guys have a good Tech Days. Thanks.